Chapter 20, Escape. Moments after Silver Spot and Razorwing got into the cage, many soldiers burst into the room with their guns pointed and ready to fire. Many red dots from the gun's lasers appeared on Silver Spot's and Razorwing's chests and foreheads. The three humans, the Sentiron, and the red-haired young man put their hands up in surrender. However, the sergeant didn't put his hands up and yelled at the soldiers, "Put those guns away right now. I am Sergeant Kane, and you will not aim your weapons at me or the doctor," he spat as he gestured towards the red-haired man. The red dots moved from the humans, including Lila and John and Sam, to Silver Spot and Razorwing. Razorwing's eyes darted across the room, looking at all of the guns pointed at him and Silver Spot. He looked at the red-haired man with a desperate expression, and the man acknowledged him with a nod. The man shouted bravely, "Put your weapons down. The targets are contained, and there is no need to fire at them." He must have had some sort of authority because the soldiers obeyed. However, they didn't exit the room and simply stood at attention near the door, watching everything with great precision as if waiting for the robots to attack. Lila sighed in relief as the red dots disappeared. The red-haired man turned to the sergeant and asked, "Can the civilians leave now?" He gestured towards the three that were standing behind him. The sergeant looked at the man with annoyed disapproval and answered, "Of course not, Doctor. Even if they were taken here wrongfully, they have still been exposed to our operations here and cannot be free to tell the public." Then Lila spoke loudly and boldly. "Yes, my family and I are going nowhere. Especially not without the Sentiron." She seemed to have no respect for the sergeant she was talking to. The red-haired man nodded in approval at Lila's courage, but the sergeant snarled, "Little girl, I don't think you know exactly what you are dealing with here." "Also, what do you mean Sentiron?" he asked. Lila covered her mouth once she realized what she had said, but Silver Spot bared her teeth and answered stubbornly for Lila. "We are the Sentiron she speaks of. The red robot and I are part of the Sentiron team, and we won't submit to the likes of you," she shouted at the sergeant. Razorwing turned and looked at the angry Silver Spot with shock, because he had never seen her speak so recklessly. Then again, she had never spoken recklessly, so she probably had a reason for her harsh words. The sergeant walked up to the bars and glared at Silver Spot. Silver Spot glared back as she added, "And that little girl has probably been through more than you have. Not to mention she, along with the other two civilians you found with us, is a part of our team, and we will defend them with our lives." She trailed off because she knew that she didn't have to say more. The sergeant and Silver Spot glared at each other for a few long seconds until the red-haired man spoke. He asked the sergeant, "So, shall we introduce ourselves since we are here?" The sergeant turned, and his eyes practically cut into the red-haired man. The man's eyes widened sarcastically, and the sergeant rolled his own eyes. The red-haired man shrugged, then introduced himself to the Sentiron team, saying, "I am Dr. Clark, but you can just call me Raphael." The man, Raphael, smiled warmly at Silverspit, and she nodded with respect. The grumpy sergeant reluctantly spoke, "I am Sergeant Kane, and I will no longer take any disrespect from any of you." He glared at Lila, but she stuck her tongue out at him. Silver Spot took the initiative and calmly looked at the humans before her as she spoke. "My name is Silver Spot, and the red robot beside me is Razorwing. We are at your service, as long as you treat us right, of course." Razorwing bowed sarcastically as the humans watched through the bars. Raphael responded, "Well, it is nice to meet you two officially." "And who are you three?" he asked as he turned to face Lila and her two family members. Lila spoke up before any of the others could say anything as she gestured toward her father. "My name is Lila, and this is my dad, Sam Carrolley." She gestured toward John. "And my uncle, John Carrolley." Sam and John both shook Raphael's hand in greeting. Once everyone was introduced, Silver Spot began a conversation saying, "Now that we have established a little trust, can Razorwing and I just talk to you from in front of these bars?" She gestured towards the electrified bars. Raphael gasped in recognition and began walking towards the console that controlled the bars. The sergeant reached out to Raphael to stop him, but before he could, Razorwing threw a red shuriken into the console, destroying it. The bars zapped with electricity, then the dangerous current stopped flowing through them. Silver Spot looked at Razorwing with disgust because he didn't have to do that, but did it anyway. The sergeant yelled, "Stop doing that. That was thousands of dollars worth of technology, you idiot." He huffed with anger, but Razorwing didn't let his name-calling go unchecked. Razorwing ripped the bars off of their supports and freed himself and Silver Spot while destroying more technology. He marched up to the sergeant and spoke angrily. "Sergeant, you forget who is the more powerful being here. Don't disrespect me, and I won't disrespect you, got it?" he asked. The sergeant nodded stubbornly and with attitude as Razorwing walked back over to the three Carolees. Lila gave him a thumbs up as his footsteps clanked closer to her. Silver Spot kneeled down to talk to Raphael. "All right, can we talk about why Razorwing, our human friends, and I were ambushed and so brutally captured?" she asked with determination. She wanted answers, and Raphael didn't mind giving them to her. But the sergeant was more secretive. The sergeant walked over to Raphael and grabbed his shoulder. "No, we can't trust them. As far as we know, they could be Russian or Japanese or somebody's spies." Silver Spot tilted her head in confusion. She hadn't even been to either of those countries. She responded for Raphael, "I have no idea how to prove it to you, but Razorwing and I are actually local and are not spies." Razorwing was paying attention only to make sure that nothing happened to Silver Spot, but other than that, he really didn't care about making alliances. That was Silver Spot's thing. He just shot people when she said it was the right tactical time and usually didn't overthink it. Lila stepped forward and showed the sergeant her phone. On it were photos taken of her and Saberclaw together, as well as a few of them with Razorwing and Silver Spot and Ironstripe. Lila spoke as she showed the sergeant the photos. "See? My family and I live here, and we have known these robots their entire lives, for the most part at least." She felt nostalgic when she scrolled to photos taken of Saberclaw when the robot wasn't ready. The sergeant gasped, "Wait, I see 4 robots in these photos." "I believe you now, child, but you must tell me where the green and black robots in the photos are hiding. They must be captured at once." He was about to signal the soldiers in the room when John spoke. John's voice was heavy when he said, "We would love to tell you where the black one is because he betrayed us, but we don't know where he is now. Also, the green one we also don't know the location of, and even if we knew, we wouldn't tell you. Now that I think of it, if you do find the green one, don't approach her because she will kill you." He sounded determined in his warning, but the sergeant listened reluctantly. Sergeant Kane responded coldly, "We will hunt down the 2 robots that we don't already have, and I think we can handle that green robot easily. I'll take my chances with it." He began to turn around when Lila corrected him. "Her. You'll take your chances with her. But don't say we didn't warn you when you come back with all of your soldiers dead. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if you don't come back either." She sounded like she was warning him, but it also sounded like a threat. The sergeant thought about this for a minute. He knew that if he did fail, then he could be demoted or even fired. So he asked, "Fine. What is the green robot's power level on a scale of 1 to 10? Or even better, how powerful is she compared to them?" He gestured towards Silverspit and Razorwing as they laughed at the silly question. Silverspot knew that if she wasn't honest, then the sergeant would lose a lot of lives in the process of hunting down Saberclaw. Thus she said, "Oh, she's about twice as powerful as both of us combined now. She doesn't know it, though. However, on the scale you asked for, she is probably an 11. She chuckled as if this statement hadn't rocked the sergeant's world. Razorwing smiled because he was proud how far Saberclaw had come. When he had first met her, she was much weaker than him, except for her words, of course. However, now she could crush him in a battle with a wave of her hand. He didn't know what Silverspot meant by "she doesn't know it, though," but he shrugged it off. The sergeant sighed and responded, "Fine, then. I won't hunt the other 2 down right now, but I will once I get some more information about them. Don't you worry." He pointed an annoyed finger at Razorwing and Silverspot. Razorwing really didn't like the sergeant, but he was looking forward to becoming better acquainted with Raphael. Raphael turned to Silverspot and gained a concerned look upon his face. "Silverspot, do you and the other robots like you have bad intentions toward Earth and humanity?" he asked. Silverspot tilted her head a little because she genuinely didn't know how to answer such a question. The honest answer was too complicated for her to explain because, Currently, Saberclaw will harm whoever she was told to, and Ironstripe's intentions were entirely uncertain. However, if Silverspot told Raphael this, then he and the sergeant would not trust her and the other three at all. Silverspot sighed and answered uncertainly, "Well, it is complicated, but Razor Wing, and I hope to harm no one." She looked at the sergeant, knowing that he probably wouldn't trust this answer. Sure enough, the sergeant turned quickly to face her and gestured wildly as he spoke. "What is complicated supposed to mean? What about the other two?" he practically yelled. Silverspot shook her head because she didn't know how to answer. Razorwing turned his head away, also shaking his head out of frustration, and waved the sergeant off. Lila began to speak, but her father interrupted her. "Listen, Sergeant, these two robots will be allies. It is like Silverspot said. The answer you are looking for is complicated and will need background information. However, since you are bent on getting a simple answer, I will give it to you without the necessary explanation." Sam was determined and didn't seem respectful as he spoke. The sergeant crossed his arms with irritation and raised his gray eyebrows, signaling Sam to continue. Sam nodded and stubbornly continued. "Well, the green robot, Saberclaw, is currently under mind control by an alien force. Ironstripe, the black robot, has uncertain motives because he was on our team, then betrayed us with what seemed to be hesitation." He spoke quickly and nervously, but his voice remained strong. Raphael's and the sergeant's jaw dropped. Raphael's eyes went wide, and he looked at his shoes with a shocked expression. "What?" He trailed off as he tried to contemplate the new information of an alien race. John's face showed amused realization as he added, "Actually, my brother forgot a second piece of crucial information. There is actually a fifth robot that none of you seem aware of. His name is Lockjaw, and his every action makes no sense, so I would be worried about him if I were you." Sam whirled around and glared daggers into John, signaling to him that he wasn't supposed to bring up Lockjaw. The sergeant shook his head again, trying to wrap his mind around the new and concerning facts. The sergeant, once he managed to organize his panicked thoughts, wasted no time as he called to the ready soldiers in the room. "All right, everyone needs to gear up now. We are going hunting." He spoke with a deadly tone as he violently stomped out of the room behind his soldiers. Before exiting, he turned and glared at Sam, then slammed the door behind him. This left just Silverspot, Razorwing, Lila, Sam, Raphael, and John in the room together. Raphael, still stunned and confused, gestured wildly. "What in the world do you mean? An alien race is here? A fifth robot we were only tracking for. What does this mean for humanity? I need details," he screamed, panicked. Silverspot ignored him, and her face fell as she realized what the sergeant had left to do. She took a step forward as she realized she couldn't get out of the room without damaging something. That ignorant military man is going to get himself and his men killed. "How do we get out of here?" she asked frantically as she tried to keep herself calm. She didn't want any casualties, so she knew that she had to stop the sergeant. Razorwing glanced around the room at all of the chaos and decided to handle one problem at a time. He locked eyes with Raphael and quickly said, "Raphael, everything that was said just now is true. Silverspot and I's team will figure out how to defend this planet and its inhabitants, but that is not at the top of our problem list right now." Raphael settled and accepted this answer, but not without muttering under his breath, "Well, it should be." Razorwing whipped around to speak to Silverspot. "We can figure an escape plan out in a bit, Silver. Just calm down for now and think of something while I talk to Raphael." He spoke with urgency, but his voice snapped Silverspot out of her panicked state. Silverspot watched as Razorwing leaned down to speak with Raphael. Usually, the roles would be reversed, and Razorwing would be the one needing comfort. Silverspot had always been the calm senior figure in the small group of Sentiron, but the immature Razorwing seemed to be gaining some wisdom. This made Silverspot proud, so she smiled as she thought of a way to get out of the large room. Razorwing put his armor-plated arm on his knee as he kneeled in front of Raphael. He tilted his metal head as he spoke. "Raphael, I know that you don't have the full picture right now, but that will come later. I don't know when we will see each other again after today, so I need to be able to trust you. Can you be our ally on the inside?" If anything happens that has to do with the Sentiron within the military, can we trust you to defend us? He asked with seriousness as Raphael looked down at his shoes. Defending the Sentiron to his superiors could mean negative consequences, but he felt like it would be the right thing to do. He looked up at Razorwing's large, metal body and locked eyes with him. Raphael had a glint in his eyes as he answered, "Yes, I will do my best to cover you guys, but don't do anything stupid. You all can get out by those garage doors behind the cages. I will open them." He walked over to one of the consoles and pressed one of the buttons. The garage doors that the robots could easily get through opened, and Razorwing watched them slide into place on the ceiling. Silver Spot slid through the broken bars of the cage and made sure that all 3 humans followed her. Razorwing smiled at Raphael as the remnants of the Sentiron team left the building and the garage doors closed behind them. Meanwhile, Saberclaw and Lockjaw had been sent on a patrol mission by Rebay. They had been sent back to Earth's surface and were currently stalking a town near the hangar. The houses were painted white with gray roofs. All of the houses in the neighborhood were almost identical to each other except for different decorations in each small yard. Surrounding the houses and running throughout the town was a series of trees and small parks that had just enough greenery to hide the 2 large robots. Saberclaw was crouched down on the tips of her boots, watching the humans and cars move about the streets closely. Her eyes were locked on one human that seemed familiar. She didn't recognize him now, but he was actually one of her classmates she had noticed in class but didn't bother to meet him. Lockjaw was a little more relaxed, as he also examined the buildings along the sidewalks with boredom. He glanced over at Saberclaw as he spoke with frustration. "Why are we here again?" he asked. Saberclaw didn't stop watching everything around her, but answered him dismissively. "There is suspected Sentiron activity in the area, and we must make sure that there is nothing unusual happening." She spoke with an emotionless tone that disappointed Lockjaw. He inched closer to her. "Everything seems fine to me. Why don't you just relax and have a real conversation with me? We haven't spoken about anything but Rebaya's commands for so long. We are on the same side now, so we should be closer." He hoped that she would take the hint, but she simply side-eyed him and answered, "We are simply following Her Majesty's commands, nothing more." She went back to watching everything else closely. Lockjaw sighed with defeat as he thought about what to do now. However, Saberclaw was anything but bored. Rebaya's mind control made her body focus on following the alien queen's commands, but her actual consciousness was screaming at Lockjaw to attempt to free her from the terrible cage that was her own body. Lockjaw sat down and braced himself against a thick tree, not trying to be quiet at all. Saberclaw whipped around and scolded him. "Lockjaw, if the humans notice us, we will have ruined Queen Rebaya's plan. Take this seriously, or I will have to report your carelessness to Her Majesty." Her eyes gleamed with purple streaks as Lockjaw shrugged. He didn't feel threatened by Saberclaw, so he didn't take her seriously. He let his head fall to the side. "Saber, you are acting so, I don't even have a word for it. Unusual." "Yeah, unusual is how you're acting. You realize that Rebay isn't here, and we can just enjoy the freedom, right?" He spoke casually, and Rebaya's presence in Saberclaw's head was furious, but it was actually ironic. Lockjaw's words about being free from Rebay currently were unknowing, but Saberclaw was anything but free from Rebay. Saberclaw didn't answer, so Lockjaw assumed that she was considering his proposal. His heavy steps made little noise since he was now trying to be quiet. He crouched beside her and pulled her closer to him. His hand forced her face towards him, so her metal eyes locked on his. He spoke softly. "Come on, it's just me and you right now, Dash." He was staring at her intently when he felt a familiar sharpness against his neck. He sighed as Saberclaw pressed her blade against him. "Stop calling me Saber. That is not my name. Also, I will not let you distract me from our mission." She lowered her weapon and glared at him, waiting for a response. Lockjaw didn't let it appear on his face, but he was a little heartbroken that Saberclaw had rejected him with such a lack of emotion. He shrugged. "All right, fine. Saberclaw, I think this area is free of unusual activity." Saberclaw was satisfied with his submission, so she turned again to check on the scene before her. Lockjaw seemed to be right, so the green robot was about to walk away from the area when she noticed movement out of the corner of her optic. She saw tall bushes moving wildly and a red glow that shined through the green plants. Alongside the movement along the outskirts of the woods, a concrete sidewalk wound its way through the town. On the sidewalk, walking alongside the hidden movement, two men and a young girl talked in hushed tones. Saberclaw immediately snapped to attention, watching the strange movement closely. Because of the mind control, Saberclaw didn't recognize the humans, but she was almost certain that the strange glow and movement was something of concern. Saberclaw ducked down, hiding herself and masking the glow of her own eyes. She grabbed Lockjaw and yanked him to the ground beside her. Lockjaw, not understanding her sudden movement, looked around wildly as he tried to figure out why she abruptly snapped back into focus. He, too, spotted the movement and the red and white glow. He watched curiously as he tried to determine what it was. However, Saberclaw was almost entirely certain. She recognized the glow as Sentiron eyes. Saberclaw and Lockjaw had been given direct orders to not engage the Sentiron if they encountered them, but the two had a completely camouflaged way of getting to the enemy. If they cut through the thin forest, they could ambush the Sentiron without being noticed by any humans except for maybe the three walking beside the badly camouflaged Sentiron. Saberclaw was listening for any chatter to confirm of the Sentiron's presence, but only heard sudden movement from beside her. Saberclaw looked in Lockjaw's direction and saw that he had disappeared. She looked up and saw him sneaking as quietly as possible toward the Sentiron.